Alright, my name is Kong.
My name is Jose.
My name is Maria.
My name is Abigail.
My name's Angel.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you, first of all, where your parents were born and when they came to the United States. Okay?
My parents were born in Laos, but then we are Hmong. And my parents came to the United States around the 1970s, late 1970s.
My parents were from Mexico. They came to the U.S. About 2000, around the year 2000.
My parents are Mexican, and my dad came here when he was 15, and my mom when she was 19.
My dad is from El Salvador and my mom is from Mexico, but they both came together around 18 years ago.
Both my parents are from Mexico. My dad came when he was 16, and my mom came when she was 18.
Okay. So were any of you born outside of the United States?
I was born outside the United States.
Okay, so we'll talk about your experience here in a little bit. When you started school, did you speak English or what language did you speak when you started school?
I spoke English when I started.
Okay,
Spanish.
Spanish.
Spanish and a little bit of English.
Okay,
Same with me, Spanish, a little bit of English.
More Spanish, a little bit of English.
more Spanish, a little bit of English. Okay, so describe, if you can think back, and maybe you can talk about your parents' experience if you have heard from your parents or other people in your family that you know. What was your first experience like in the United States in a school? What was that first day of kindergarten like, if you remember? Where you were much older when you came, what was that like?
I was in 7th grade when I came to the U.S. and I knew no English, so it was not a good experience. I was the only Hispanic that didn't speak English in the whole entire school. So for everything I had to get somebody to translate for me, and it was kind of not good because a lot of them would not want to translate. You know, they had their own classes, their own schedule to follow. So it was pretty tough.
You were telling me last semester about your first day, the ESL teacher hands you your schedule and just says, good luck?
Yeah, pretty much. First of all, to explain that, in Mexico the schools are way different than here. In Mexico you're in one room all day, teachers switch, but they will come to your room. You don't switch rooms. Here in the US you have to actually go find your teachers. You have to go find the room where the teachers are located. So whenever, first of all, I didn't know where to go. I didn't know the map, the building. And then the ESL teacher gives me this schedule with like 7 classes in there. And I was like, okay, so which room do I go? The teachers come to me, how is this gonna work? The first week, I was lost. I was late to every class because I didn't know.
And you couldn't even ask questions, right?
I couldn't.
Yeah, unless you could find a student that could help you.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
It was pretty tough.
Yeah. Christina, what was your first day like? Do you remember it? I'm not Christina, I'm sorry, Maria. I did that again. I'm so sorry.
Well, kind of nerve-wracking since I didn't really know English, but...
Were there many students in your class who spoke Spanish? Or
Yes.
Okay, so you had other students
I
you
had
could talk
people
with.
help.
Do you remember trying to talk to your teacher or your teacher talking to you and you not understanding what they were saying?
Well, I mean, after a while, I got used to it, so
Mhm.
it kind of helped having other students help at the same time.
Yes. Okay, what about you?
I was kind of the same way, except I knew a little bit more English because I have 4 older brothers and they had been going to school already, so I learned from them. But it was weird going to school and seeing that other people didn't talk as much Spanish or people didn't know Spanish, since I thought that everyone around me did.
That's interesting, yeah. So did you walk up to some children and try to speak in Spanish and they couldn't answer you?
No, I was scared.
Okay, so you didn't talk to anybody,
Yeah.
you were just quiet,
Yeah.
okay. What about you, Anna?
Well, my mom started me out early in school, preschool, and so I learned a little bit of English there. But when I started kindergarten, it was easy. Like, I understood the teacher and everything, but
I didn't really understand what we were doing, where we were going. So I was just like the kid in the back, like just following around. And I did this a lot throughout like elementary school, even in middle school. Like ESL, they had me testing too, and it made me feel kind of bad about myself. It's like, why am I getting tested for this? And I passed the test though later on, and I didn't have to go anymore. But it was pretty tough at first. But after I finally understood, because I was the only child, and I had to translate for my parents because they didn't know that well. I just had to go along with it, learn.
Did you have very many Hispanic students in your school that you went to?
I had a couple friends in middle school, but in elementary school, not really.
You were the only one?
I was only maybe one or two, and I hanged out with him.
Yeah.
He was my best friend. But
So would you guys speak Spanish when you were like on the playground and
We
when you
would.
could? Yeah.
yes.
Okay. So, Kong, do you speak your native language at home?
At home, I speak my native language, but like in elementary school, I spoke English, but I knew a lot of words, but I didn't pronounce them all correctly. And then as I grew older, I learned how to correctly pronounce words and other things and grammar. Yeah.
What about the food? You know, I have talked to a lot of students over the years. We were talking about how just opening a carton of milk, you know, if you come from Mexico, there aren't cartons of milk, they're bottles, you know, so that first experience. But obviously the native food is very different. So did you take your lunch or did you eat off the tray? And what was that experience like eating food from the United States, especially school cafeteria food of all things to experiment with?
Well, when I went to, of course, 7th grade, I was eating from the cafeteria, and I did have trouble opening my milk.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know how, so I had to get a student help me actually with it. But at the beginning of the school, I actually thought the food was pretty fancy because you know, I wasn't used to eating. They would serve pizza, they would serve French fries and other stuff. We were not used to eating those kinds of food. We were used to eating our homemade food, you know, Mexican food style. So once you go to the cafeteria, you actually eating this food that they, you know, they sell like in McDonald's or all these other places. So for me, I thought it was fancy, you know, so I tasted it, it wasn't that good anymore. And I started missing my mom's cooking.
Mm-hmm.
But even the food, it was tough to go through because I had to go through the line. They would ask me for a number that I had to provide to them, and you know, with no English, I couldn't do it. So actually, I did the same thing as Angel did. I would follow this guy in front of me. He was a Hispanic, so I was like, well, if he sees me struggling, he's gonna help me.
Mm-hmm.
So I would do that. I would just go behind him. I will, you know, if I get stuck in a situation, then he will come back and he will help me.
So he did help you then?
Yes, he did help me
Yeah,
with that.
some of my experience has been, and it was shocking for me as an ESL teacher, that sometimes other students didn't want to help the new students coming in, and that was always shocking for me because I thought that everyone would want to help, you know, but then I would find sometimes those students were even sometimes mean, you know, because they wanted to be Americanized so badly, they didn't want to be associated with the students who were coming in as immigrants. And so I remember particularly I had a student in a class, I had gone on maternity leave, so I wasn't there, and he didn't speak any English, and I sat him next to a bilingual student thinking that bilingual student would help, but then come to find out she had been really mean to him while I was gone and didn't want to help him at all. And I know it's not their responsibility. Did you ever feel like maybe you were expected too much to help another student? Did you ever have a time like that where you were helping a student a lot and maybe that hurt your grades because you were helping so much?
At
Do
my
you remember
school,
that?
yeah, we would have to help, and I wouldn't mind it at all since they were new.
Mm-hmm.
I got to help them, and I liked helping them,
Mm-hmm.
so that helped them more. And especially the math class, they sat a girl next to me, and throughout the whole year, we just helped each other, and we kept high grades. So I worried more about her passing than myself, but
That's
we both
interesting.
managed.
And it probably helped you because you were explaining things to
Mhm.
her, so then it helped you understand the process
Yes.
more. Did you ever have a time when it was kind of hard on you?
Well, I had in 8th grade in my computer, the keyboarding class,
Mhm.
it was a girl that knew no English at all, so I had to explain everything to her. And I didn't know very well Spanish either, so
Mhm.
some things I didn't know how to explain to her, or
Especially
I didn't know
those
how to translate.
technical terms.
Yeah, that's
yeah.
the thing that it was. I couldn't tell her exactly what the teacher was saying, and then I felt pressured because if I was wrong and she got something wrong, then it was my
Mhm.
fault. And so that was the only pressure of that, was trying to be right every time.
And that was a difficult class, so
Yeah.
you're trying to keep up and know what the teacher's saying. And so,
Yeah.
what about you, Angel? When you got older, were there other kids that moved in?
Yeah, in high school,
Mhm.
kids would want to try out for a soccer team, and they would just come to me or say in school they didn't know where it was. That I would help them, but it did, like, because I felt like there should be more teachers trying to help. Like, for me, they just came to me, like, and they asked me, like, where's this class? And I would take them to class. I would sometimes be late to class, but I mean, I didn't mind.
Mhm.
Some teachers would understand, some wouldn't. Some would be like, it doesn't matter, go get a target. And I'm like, oh, okay. And yeah, and when they joined the soccer team, I would talk to the coach, like, this is someone, and he's from Mexico or Guatemala, and he just wants to try out. And coach was like, all right, and just tell him I would translate for him. And yeah, as I helped them. But one thing I didn't see is that I was younger and I would ask for help. Like, I saw like how people got bothered. Like, they would make a face, they would make a sigh, and you didn't want to go back to that person. It felt bad, like just getting rejected. So it was harder to get help.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
that's why I try showing a positive face when people ask me for help.
That's important, I think, to remember. I remember thinking somebody helped either you or your parents, but I do understand that weight of you don't want to fall behind. What about, did you have experiences where you had to translate to help other students?
I didn't really grow up with other kids. I grew up with a lot of American kids.
So let's talk about that. Okay, what was that like?
It was really good because I guess it helped me enhance my English,
Mhm.
and I haven't really helped people with English more than like other subjects, like in math or in PE or a lot of different subjects, because we would just, I don't know, it all just went along because there wasn't really much translating to do.
Mhm.
So when I grew up, I just helped a lot of people with like the basic learning subjects.
You were more like a tutor,
Kind of, yeah.
depending on the subject.
Yes.
So what was it like? I've been a minority. I went to a school that was 90% African American, and so I was one of 2 white cheerleaders. I remember that feeling. It's very different,
Yeah.
So talk about what it feels like to be the minority and not to have other people that understand your culture or how things work.
Well, it was really different when they asked me about my culture because I grew up Americanized so much that I really didn't know that much of my culture, except that when I go home I speak my language to my parents, and whenever I wasn't home I spoke English all the time. And it felt, well, when I was younger it felt different because I was the only Hmong person in my whole school. But as I grew up, it didn't really affect me because I kind of grew into it.
Mhm.
So
What did you feel like when you moved to Arkansas, correct? And
Yes.
you said there weren't very many Hispanics at the time, so how did that feel?
Well, you were limited on what you could do as far as, going out and hanging out with other people. I was pretty much stuck at home the whole time. I didn't start making friends until 9th grade. That's when I started actually talking more to American people as same as other Hispanic people. But it is pretty bad. But after that, it was just like anything. I got a job at Walmart, and I was working with American people.
That
So
makes you learn English
that made
quickly.
me, really quick.
You're working at Walmart.
And we got along pretty well.
Mhm.
In that area, there's a lot of country.
Yes,
Country.
yes.
people,
Uh-huh.
folks.
Folks, yes.
So their accent,
Mhm.
sometimes whenever they speak, is a little different,
Yes.
and it rubs on you whenever you hang out around them a lot.
So you were a Hispanic student who had a country accent learning English.
It was pretty amusing,
I bet.
but you know they're nice folks, and we got along well. We're still friends till this day.
That's awesome.
So
I know that there is obviously racism still that exists. I wish that there weren't, but being a teacher of English language learners for the last 10 years, I've personally witnessed it with other students, even sometimes teachers, you know, that maybe they say they're not, you know, but then you talked about reading body language. How important was body language when you were first learning, or did you find that you read body language more often than what people were saying?
Yes, I actually did. If like I would hear them talk and stuff, but I would look at more body language, their facial expressions a lot, to see if they were actually like willing to help or not. Like they were just doing it because they had to.
Mm-hmm.
So that would depend if I would go back to that person or not. And but if I would bring someone else to them, that's which I did.
What were some of the preconceived ideas? You know, racism is born out of ignorance, which means lack of knowledge. People don't understand, you know, culture. They don't understand. They've never experienced it. You know, they've experienced their world. So what were some of the things that maybe you've had to face, or things you've had to correct, things that maybe even your friends didn't understand? Talk about that.
eye contact.
Eye contact. Okay, talk about that.
In Mexico, we're not used to have a lot of eye contact with teachers or, you know, upper level people.
People of authority,
Yes,
right? Okay.
Yes. So whenever we would talk to them, we would, like, you know, talk and look down. That's something that I had to learn. So whenever you talk to people, you look them on the eye. And that's what the teacher would say. Hey, when you talk to me, you look me on the eye. But whenever they would tell me that, I thought they were mad at me because they were asking me to look them at the eye whenever we were talking. So I was thinking, what did I do? Did I do something wrong? That you're making me look you in the eye? So that's something that I have to learn, that's a common thing here.
That's a good point, because imagine that student feeling conflicted because they've been told that when you look someone in the eye, you're putting yourself on their level. So you're trying to be humble and look down because a person of authority is talking to you, and then that person is saying, look at me. So I can imagine that would be difficult. Did you find that at times? You remember that because you were younger? Or another experience you've had?
Eye contact, pretty much, since it is something different.
What about you? I mean, I know you grew up around a lot of Hispanics,
Yeah. Well, something that I kind of noticed sometimes, I didn't do it because I was taught differently, but sometimes the people that are, you know, they come later from other countries, they don't call the teacher by their name. They would just say teacher.
Teacher.
And it's because that's what they did in Mexico or wherever they came from, and here was perceived as being rude that you wouldn't call them by their name.
Yes.
And that's something that was really different, because I was taught to, you know, say their name, but they weren't, and I didn't think it was weird that they didn't do it either, because I saw both sides. But I would see sometimes teachers would, you know, say, they would actually get mad and tell them to say their name and not just teacher.
It used to bother me when I first started, and then I thought, well, they're not calling me a bad name. You know, it could be much worse. They could be calling me a bad name. So I'm like, I'll take my Estra, you know. I thought that it was kind of sweet, actually. But you're right. There are teachers that get irritated, you know, because they don't understand that. What about anything with you with culture that you saw, or preconceived ideas?
When I was younger, I moved around. Well, I moved schools a lot. But then around like kindergarten to 2nd grade, I was at a new school every year.
Wow.
And I didn't know because I got stared at a lot, but I didn't know if it was because I was a new kid or if it was because the color of my skin. But then I think it was just because I was a new kid, because I was in Minnesota and there was a big population of Hmong people. But then the schools that I went to were suburban schools. And when I moved to Missouri, I was at a really small school that had a big community of country folks, and at first I felt like I was being stared at and targeted because of the color of my skin. And some people, it might have been that, but I know like at my school, it was just because I was a new student. Because eventually, as I got older, the staring kind of, like, you could kind of tell when there's more new kids, they'd get the stare too, so I figured that it was probably just because I was new. And then growing up, being older, getting involved with sports as we traveled to school. We moved to other cities because my family was the only Hmong family around, and all the other schools were a bunch of Americans. And whenever we traveled, I would always get bad looks, but then my coach would always just tell me to ignore it and just play the sport. So.
I remember since I was one of 2 white cheerleaders, our basketball team had, they were all black except for one student who was white, and being a cheerleader, you're right next to the court, so you hear what's being said, and it was shocking, to me, just the racial slurs that were thrown. And then the school district that I worked in, the soccer team was predominantly Hispanic, and since I understand Spanish, I would hear racial slurs being thrown, on the field, and just knowing that that still exists today, obviously it's because of ignorance and people just don't understand better. But did you have any experiences like that being on the soccer team?
A lot. Just they would get like I think, well, they would get onto you. They would just give you looks. They would, even the crowd, like sometimes when we went to travel away games, when it was more a white population school, they would say stuff at me in the crowd. Like even sometimes they threw stuff at me.
Wow.
Just I would be like, why? What's the point? And then Parkview School, one time like I just couldn't take it anymore. I got in a fight with the kid, and we got in a huge fight, the whole team, and it just gets to you at some point. I wish it didn't, but
Yeah.
you face a lot. I'm pretty sure with Kong too.
Yeah.
You see a lot of it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of slurs when I heard, mostly in baseball, because I don't know why they said it, but I feel like we're outside, so they probably think I wouldn't hear it. But then I heard a lot of people call me, oh, they have an Asian, they have a Chinese player, they're no good. And then what always amazes me, and it satisfies me, because when we play, they don't expect me, because I was kind of good at baseball, and then they'd always look down on me because I was Asian. So that's the only thing that satisfied me with playing sports, was I showed
them up,
I
right?
showed them up.
The revenge that
Yes.
comes. Same thing probably with soccer too, right?
Yeah.
You get out there and you can show them up on the field.
After that happened, I just stuck to the game. I tried not bring it out. They could say all they want, and I would just keep playing. There's no point to. I mean, they're the person that's gonna be looked down upon, not me.
Yeah. Did you ever feel comfortable enough to go to your teachers, when you were in school, if you were being discriminated against, or was it just something you just kept to yourself?
I kept to myself.
Okay.
I think I saw some people try to go to a authority figure, and they couldn't really do anything. I mean, they would just go and tell them not to do it again, but obviously that didn't change anything, and they would do it again.
Yeah.
So you kind of just had to deal with it. And I mean, if you tell your parents, they tell you that's how it is. I mean, they had it worse, my parents, when they came. My dad couldn't even order a meal from McDonald's. So he understood, but he knew that you couldn't do anything about it. You just have to tough it out. So
It's difficult to deal with. What advice would you give teachers? What were some of the things that you struggle with in school, or you saw others struggle with, that would have helped if the teacher would have done something differently? What do you think?
I think that teachers, before they act, they need to learn a little bit about the person.
Okay.
And not just the person, but also consider where they're coming from, the different cultures, these different people are coming from. Because a lot of them, they're really quick to act on what they have been taught in school, to teach, which we know that changes all the time, the rules and all that stuff, the policies change all the time. So I think that teachers need to start learning, instead of, of course, they're teachers, they need to teach the students, but they also need to learn from the students. They need to learn to, ways that they can help them and understand them a little bit more.
So what I hear you saying is not just be an expert in their content area, but be an expert on the cultures that they're teaching to understand where their kids are coming from. Yeah.
Because the teachers, they don't know what struggles the students are going through. It could be a simple addition problem on the board, but they never learn it in their previous country.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know. So they don't know how to do it. So the teachers, they need to understand that not all of them are going to come to the same level. And sometimes, they have to make a few exceptions to help the students out.
That's good. What else would you guys say?
I would say be patient, since it's not easy for the student. I would say the student is excited at first, but if they get treated bad that first day, they won't be as happy to go back.
Yeah.
Just for the teacher to understand.
And I've had students that have come, they've immigrated one day and were in school the next day, so the culture is different, the language is different, the food's different. I remember a student who, he came back to my class and he got out a piece of paper. He was in 7th grade and a red pen, and he just started scribbling angrily. He was so angry. And I said, what is wrong? And he was like, hay tantas reglas, there's so many rules. And he didn't understand, all these rules, because he would get yelled at in the hallway because he wasn't doing something correctly, but he didn't even understand what the rule was. And so I asked the interpreter at the time, I said, can you take my group of newcomers to the gym and go play basketball with them, because they had all this pent-up frustration, So they went down to the gym and they just played basketball. They came back to class, they were all sweaty, and just worn out, and sat down and was like, thinking about your brain is working harder. It has to work in both languages and translate everything. Something that I didn't understand was, if you've learned one language as a native speaker and you didn't learn those languages simultaneously, your brain will always translate back and forth. It's just the processing speed is faster. So it's exhausting, to go back and forth between the two languages, and you have more gray matter developed in your brains. Your brains are smarter because you guys have developed those skills, but it's more tiring. So do you remember going home and being tired, that first year of school, because you're having to translate back and forth?
I remember actually going home and having to translate to my parents all the papers that they give you on the first day. I remember having to go, because you have to get so many things signed.
Yes.
And even my parents would get frustrated because you have to read everything to them, and sometimes you don't understand what it says, but they still have to sign it. So I remember doing that a lot.
Yeah.
It was kind of annoying.
Because you'd already been speaking English all day, and then you're having to come over and translate. Yeah. I know when I travel to foreign countries, I only go at a week at a time, but the first day, I'm like, I just want to close my ears and go to sleep. I can't take another word of Spanish because my brain is so tired, and I would be the one translating for everyone. I'm like, okay, I can't translate another sentence because I'm exhausted, Do you still have to translate for your family?
Yes, whenever it comes to business papers, stuff like that, I translate for them, or doctor's papers.
Mm-hmm.
But now my parents learned, because in the beginning they didn't know anything. I had help with everything, and then as they like more time spent here, they learned too. Now they know if I'm in trouble or not. Like,
you can't get away with it anymore, right? So an F is not fantastico, like you tell your parents, right? Yeah. I remember when I first moved to the school district that I worked in, I was the translator, which was kind of scary because there's people that speak Spanish much better than I. But kids would tell their parents they didn't have school, And the parents believed them, and so they wouldn't go to school, and then they would get suspended, and they'd say they were on vacation, you know, or they got an F, and they said it stood for fantastic. Well, then we started getting interpreters in every school, and the parents really started figuring out how it all worked, you know, after the interpreters would come home. So, yeah, so the game's over, right?
That was different, and it was different. In Mexico, didn't they grade like 1 to 10?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And over here, it's A, B. They were just like, what is this? Like,
Yeah, so you could kind of get away with it for a while until they figured out the system. That's good to know. So how long did it take you to become fluent in English? And are there still any areas that you still struggle in? Would you say that you're completely bilingual? Are there areas that you still struggle with?
I don't think I know the English 100%. I still struggle in a few pronunciations, a few words.
Mm-hmm.
But I understand, you know, all of it pretty much. It's just that whenever it's time to talk back, sometimes I have trouble, you know, with a few words, especially when I'm nervous.
Yes.
I have to do a lot of presentations for some of my classes, and when I practice, it's fine. But whenever I'm in front of the class, I get nervous, and when I get nervous, my accent comes up,
Mm-hmm.
and all of a sudden I'm talking Spanish and speak English.
So you've raised a good point because you came 7th grade, so you were 13, 12,
13.
So most likely you'll always have your accent because you started learning the language post 7 years old. And so do people assume because you have the accent that you don't speak English well?
I actually get the feeling that they think that. A lot of instructors, not anymore, but when I start college, a lot of instructors were actually, whenever it was time to do like a team assignment or something like that, they would always try to put us with a Hispanic, assuming that because we were all Hispanic, that we will help each other better, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But we work well with Hispanic, that's understandable. But we're okay working with other people also. But the instructors are assuming that we don't work well with other people, that we rather work with Hispanic.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just an assumption.
Yes, yeah, that's a good point. So you all, for the most part, don't have an accent from what I can hear because you learned younger, but how long did it take you, would you say?
I say it took me a couple of years, probably till I was, because elementary school I still spoke Spanglish, and then middle school it was finally like I started getting it down, and then high school, and now I feel like I know more English than Spanish, which I actually do kind of like I regret because I go to Mexico and then I'm the one that's like they think is weird because I can't talk Spanish correctly, and I wish like I wasn't forced to forget my language when I was over here, but if I want to move on here, I have to. Like,
there aren't very many opportunities, are there, for you to learn Spanish well, you know, as far as how to read and write it?
I just know how to read and write, but I mean, just read and talk it, but not really write it.
Write it, yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. How long would you say it took you to become fluent?
Well, whenever I was in elementary school, I was horrible at English. Like, I was really bad. And I went to elementary school in California, so the Hispanic population was bigger, so we did talk Spanish to each other. So my English was really bad. But then, I mean, my parents would get so mad if you didn't get a 10 or 100 on any of your stuff, and English was my worst thing. So my oldest brother, he had to teach himself English. He moved here when he was 13. So he's the one that helped me out, and then it ended up being my best subject, but it's just because I had to push myself because I hated not being able to speak English well and being looked down upon just because I'm Hispanic. And but the same thing with me, whenever I go to Mexico or I'm with my family, I can't speak Spanish well. And they'll make fun of you because that's how the culture is.
Right.
And but it does make you feel bad just thinking that, you had to push your culture away just to fit in here, but then you go back to your family and you're the weird one. So you're the weird one in both cultures, and it just kind of sucks.
a local school district is thinking about doing dual language immersion, which is where they will start teaching Spanish and English half day, starting in kindergarten. So Anglo students and Hispanic students will be together, but they'll be half day in English, half day in Spanish. Would you have liked to have done something like that?
Go with that.
Yeah. How would that have helped you? Or if it would have been Hmong and English, how would that have helped you?
Well, it would have helped me quite a bit because my Hmong it's kind of faded away because ever since I was little, I never had anyone Hmong to speak to, so I kind of just lost my language. Like I know a lot of words, but I can't really put them all together to make like a good sentence. But I understand it and I can speak it, just not to the whole bit. Yeah.
You guys describe our book, the educational psychology book, talks about the 1.5 generation, and that's the generation that comes and loses their native language, but maybe sometimes they don't grasp the English language well. You all obviously grasp the English language well because you're getting a college education, but there's a lot of students who are stuck without a good grasp in either, language. Have you seen that happen?
Yes, I have come across some people that they speak really good English, but they will talk to you a few words in Spanish because they either don't know what it is in Spanish, or it takes them too long to translate it. So they will talk to you all these sentences in English, and all of a sudden a few words in Spanish, and go back to English and go down to Spanish. And for some people that's annoying because they don't think that's good. But I understand, they're trying their best to learn the language and everything, and it's taking them a little while. But a lot of them actually have been in the country for way too many years, and it doesn't seem like they're going to get any better. It's just something they keep doing. They keep doing it, and they feel comfortable doing it. But
Maria, was it work for you to become good at English?
It wasn't too bad. Elementary school and it was difficult, but middle school I got better at it, and high school and college now I'm better at both. So it's really not that hard.
You guys just said what research says. Research says it takes 7 to 10 years. So if you're saying middle school, that's probably 6th, 7th grade. That's when you really become academically proficient. You have that social English and, but then by middle school, you really have the English skills down. And then typically, it can take up to 10 years where you are on level with native speakers. And so you've just verified that, in your own experiences. I had a student whose dad, he had moved here, and his dad said, in 30 days, you will have to go and buy a car for me and do the whole transaction in English. We had to sit down with the dad and say, your child's not going to learn English in 30 days. That's impossible. Did your parents, maybe you talked about they expected the 10s, they expected the 8s. Did they have unrealistic expectations of what you could and couldn't do in school?
Yeah, and even just with their stuff, even now that they know better English, I have to do all the calls to the insurance and for their bills and write their checks for them because they don't, they can do it, but they're afraid that it'll be wrong and they don't want to mess up. So I'm responsible, for doing their stuff and getting their stuff right. And then on top of that, doing housework. I know this is how my parents are because they're really strict. And then having good grades and being involved in school. And they don't always understand, at least my parents, my dad especially, because he's really strict with sports and stuff. If I would come home late, I would get in so much trouble. And it wasn't my fault, it was games. And late for him was 10. Anytime after 10, if I was home at 11, I would get in so much trouble. Or practices, if they came out later than they were supposed to and he was waiting for me, I would get in trouble. And it's just stuff like that that he didn't understand because the culture here was different. So we have to teach them on top of learning the culture ourselves.
Yes, that's a good point. Unrealistic expectations from your parents?
I'm pretty sure in middle school, yeah, it wasn't realistic. They wanted me doing stuff like paper stuff, like insurance. And I'm like, I don't know this stuff yet. And I'm like, can you not get a translator? Like, I don't know this yet for sure. Like, I might be wrong. And in high school, then I really started like just helping them with everything I could because I understood it more. And yeah.
So you have to grow up faster,
I
is
think-
what I'm hearing you
yes.
guys say. You're doing adult work as a child.
And I think that program you said about the kindergarten teaching them, that would help a lot because kids would understand each other more.
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment on that.
Yeah,
'cause I
thank
think
you.
it would be great.
Well, and I'm thinking that, I know in the school district we came from, if you walk into the cafeteria to this day, you have your white tables and you have your Hispanic tables. My personal theory is the language isolates the students at first, and so they can't become friends in the first couple of years, and so then it just becomes more comfortable to stay in your group than to. You've mentioned sports, that made you integrate sports. Were you involved in sports at all?
I was in softball.
In softball, so that forced you to integrate. But did you see with maybe some of your peers where they didn't because they weren't working with other students as much and they just stuck with their
Well,
culture?
I felt like they understood. They were all really nice, and
Mhm.
even other teammates. I was one of 3 Hispanics on the softball team, and so it was us 3 mostly,
Mhm.
but yet we all still got along.
That's awesome. That's what a great experience. You girls, have you ever been to a slumber party? Is that something that you are allowed to go to, or?
No. I will, whenever we first came here, and even now, my dad won't let me. I mean, I have to convince him to let me go. He has to actually know them.
Mhm.
Just because over there, I mean, in El Salvador, you don't do that. You,
Mhm.
and the day's over and you go home to your parents and, you know. But I remember your friends will think you're weird and they'll tell you stuff like, oh, you get hit because they don't let you know. I mean, in Spanish, it
Mhm.
sounds different.
Yes.
And it sucked because you couldn't go and be with your friends, but you didn't want to get in trouble with your parents and everything. So you had to turn down a lot of social stuff just because the culture was different.
You brought up, you guys are bringing up so many good points, but you're talking about getting hit, which is being spanked, in the United States. And so discipline, very different, between countries. I don't know about the Hmong culture, but so that is perceived differently with your friends. How are children disciplined in Hmong culture?
With us, we were. I wasn't really a naughty kid, but
Unlike some people, though.
not saying you were. But, it was. We didn't really get hit. We just had. It was more communication, and we'd always just get yelled at, and I guess that was our discipline. 'Cause,
Like lectures?
Lectures, yes. Because my parents always wanted us to do good. So I was the youngest, and so their expectations were like realistic because they experienced it with all my older siblings. So they knew like I had to do good. They knew what I had to do because I couldn't just fake anything. Yeah.
Is there any difference in discipline?
No, it's pretty much the same. Well, first of all, when I got here to the U.S., I was 13, so they were expecting me to work at 13. So I remember going out looking for jobs. Of course, everybody refused to give me jobs.
You were only 13.
Because I was only 13, so
Yeah.
we're like, no, we don't do that. We can't hire you. You're only 13. But my parents didn't understand that.
Mhm.
So they will get mad, right? They will yell at you because they were thinking that we're not trying to find a job, that we were actually just going and walking around and come back home and saying, no, I didn't find anything. But in reality is that they didn't want to hire you because you were 13. But they were so used to the way in Mexico where you actually work since you're a little kid that they didn't understand that why wouldn't they hire you? You are 13, I'm 14, and in their eyes, I was already older. So they would get mad. It took them a few years to actually understand that the things were different here than over there.
I think that's a good theme because, I'm hearing responsibility, filling out insurance papers, chores at home, those kinds of things. So then for them to understand the balance with homework, that you have homework, that you want to be involved in sports, but then a lot of my students, and I know this sounds stereotypical, but it's true, had to go home and make tortillas, or they had to babysit siblings, or those kinds of things. Parents were working second shift or third shift. I had one student who would be up at night with the baby because mom was at work, and she would fall asleep in class. So going back to understanding where your students are coming from, talking to them, finding out what's going on at home. And it's not necessarily bad, it's just different, a different experience. But then when you see maybe other friends who are handed everything, how has that made you stronger, the experiences that you've been through?
It's made me stronger because, I have to work for my stuff. It's not just handed to me. If you want to do anything, especially here, you have to work for it. It's not going to get handed to you. I found that out. And but my parents, me with my first car, they helped me with my first car. But they told me if I want a different car, a better one, you're gonna have to work for it. They were saying when I turned 16, yeah, they just told me go work, and I was like, gosh, really didn't. They wanted me to cancel out soccer, cancel everything, and they didn't realize that I could get scholarships off that if I worked hard for that stuff. And the thing when you said seeing your friends getting handed everything, I saw that a lot. My friends were always giving what they wanted, and I was just there going, that's great. Then if I wanted stuff, I had to work for it.
I was kind of in the same shoes because as I grew up, I had a bunch of siblings, and my parents never really gave my siblings anything. But when it came to me, I was the baby, so they all babied me, which I liked it. But then I didn't take it for granted because my older siblings, they all worked for their things, and right now they're all offering me things. But I don't want to take the easy way out because in high school, a lot of my friends, they were just spoiled and they took things for granted. When they had with technology, they're always in schools with cell phones and tablets and gaming consoles, and I never even had a game console. I didn't even have anything to play with. All I had was TV now, and they'd always have a new one every year, and I was always wondering how come I can't get that stuff?
Mm-hmm.
But then I didn't realize that our family incomes are really different. So right now, it's a lot better, but I still want to just make my own income instead of looking at my parents and my siblings.
That's a good point. Let's end on that point today, but talking about maybe people in the United States not understanding how blessed they are to be in this country. I'm sure you've heard your parents tell you stories, of the difference, but it sounds like you guys understand, that you are blessed, that you have these opportunities, that you get to have an education. But what career aspirations do you want? What do you want to do? You're living the American dream that your parents wanted for you, just as my ancestors wanted for our family. So what are you wanting to do with that? How are you going to take the experiences you've been through and what your parents have done for you, and how are you going to change in your own life?
With me, I just want to help others as I've always been helped when I was growing up. Because like I said, I never really took anything for granted. Whatever I got, I took full advantage of it. I used it to the max of my ability, and that's what I want to do with others. After college, I want to be a therapist and help people because I've always been assisted in my whole life. So I feel like that's really all I know how to do is just be helpful.
So you want to be a physical therapist?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. That's awesome. I know you're already in that role, but
same as Kang, when I was in high school, I wanted to go to college, to help others. That was my number one view. You know, I want to go to college to help others. My thought was not about making money. It was about, you know, going to college, get your degree so you can help others that are in the same situation that you are now. And I know a lot of people, they want to go to college to make better incomes and, you know, to have a better living at home. And that's understandable, but I guess whenever you go through all of that situation, well, at least for me, my thought was, okay, I want to get a higher education to help others that are in the same shoes that I am now. And that's why I want to do it.
You're doing it. It's awesome. What about you?
For me, well, first off, to make my parents proud. But I want to be a dental hygienist. And my parents worked hard, so I just want to give back.
Yeah. And I could see being in a dentist office with being bilingual, how helpful that would be with the paperwork and the things that are coming in. And so that's an awesome aspiration. What about you?
I want to be a dental hygienist.
Okay, so we're going to have several bilingual dental hygienists.
Well, I wanted to do anything in like healthcare or something where I could be the translator. I mean, I know that whenever I would go to the doctor, or whenever I would go to the dentist, even if I was the one that was with a fever or something, I had to translate. And I know that my parents rather go to, you know, a doctor that has someone that can actually speak with them and tell them how to take care of me, or, you know, whenever I was little and stuff like that. So I think, I mean, I always wanted to help people too, and at first I just wanted to be a psychologist, but I knew that to be out there and actually interact with people instead of them just coming to you, I knew that that would help a lot more, so that's why I wanted to be a dental hygienist and to give back to my parents, because that's how I was taught, you know. They were the ones that gave you all your skills and all your point of views and how they raised you in your home, so I want to give back to them. That's the most important thing.
Alright, hygienist, and me, dentist.
Well, that works together. So you're going to hire these girls to come work for you?
It's a long road.
It is a long
I need a
road.
lot of support. I mostly chose this. Well, it's still like a 90%. Chose this because my aunt, I saw she came here at the same time like Jose. She struggled, and now she's in dental school,
That's awesome.
and she's close to graduating. And I just saw how motivated she is, and I want to do something with my life too. And I hope it's that, move towards that. But if I get that, like, I would help others, not just take advantage of it. I would actually help. If I saw how people don't have insurance and don't, like, I would do it some for free, like help out, give back to the community, and that's what I want to do. I want to give back to the people that love me and make my parents happy. And my ultimate goal is to, like, my dad and mom, they weren't born here. They're happy here because of us, but they want to go back. They want to go back to their country, and I at least want them to go back so they can relax like the rest of their life and help them out, and me have my life set here.